Welcome back. Today I'm going to be going over the terms and tools I use in the pottery lab. The very first thing I start out with is the clay. There are three types of clay used in ceramics: earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. Each clay body have different properties, but I mainly stick to earthenware because I like how different glazes interact with the clay, and I feel like I have more control. I just also feel comfortable with it, since I've worked with it the most. My second choice would be stoneware because of its stability. After I choose the clay, I need to get all the air bubbles out of the clay. Having air bubbles in your piece while throwing could cause the piece to come off center, and it is just a huge pain. It could also cause thicker and thinner walls while throwing, making it difficult to trim and cause it to warp. So it's better to just get all that out of the way at the very beginning. Wedging is the act of mixing the clay particles together, pushing out the air bubbles. It is pretty much just kneading the clay like you would dough. With clay, you don't want to fold it, you just want to smush it on top with the rest of the clay or slide it on top. When I finish wedging the clay, I use a wire tool to cut it into different pieces. The wire tool for me is only used twice, to cut the clay and to wire the piece off of the wheel. After I cut all the clay I need, I make sure to weigh out each piece, and then I wedge every piece quickly to make sure I get all the air bubbles out. I head over to the potter's wheel and get it ready so I can throw. When throwing, I make sure to have an abundance of tools ready for use. This is a 90-degree knife. I use it to trim off the skirt of clay that is left at the bottom of the piece after I throw it and before shaping. I also need a sponge so I can hold water in my hand while throwing, and so I can clean out the water of my piece when I am finished. I have a needle tool to help me cut off the excess of clay on my rim if it happens to be uneven. I also might use it when the base of my piece is so thin that I don't have the confidence to use my knife to cut the skirt. This is a metal rib. I use it to scrape off all the slip that is left on my piece before taking it off the wheel. It is also helpful when shaping. Lastly, I need pot lifters. I have trouble lifting the pots off of the wheel with just my hands, so these have been a big help for me. It is also necessary to have a bucket of water right by me, with my sponge in it. After the clay has been thrown onto the wheel, I need to center the clay. This is the act of compressing the once ball of clay into a cylinder that is perfectly aligned with the axis that the wheel is spinning on. Then, I work on opening my piece by creating a deep divot in the middle. I do this so I can begin pulling up the walls and form the body I imagine. When pulling the walls, I need to focus on the speed that I'm pulling. I tend to go up way too fast, making deep throwing lines and causing the clay to come off center, which has been annoying me. When shaping the piece, I use the metal rib to get the shape I intend while also scraping the slip off. I then use the knife to cut the skirt of clay off. I then tidy up my piece and remove the water from the inside and wire off the wheels and use pot lifters to lift it up. I then put it aside to dry. Since the piece I made was even on the rim, I just wanted to show you how I cut off an uneven rim on another piece I made. An uneven rim is caused by my pulls being too fast, my wheel being off its speed, or air pockets causing the walls to be thick on one side and thin on another. Here is a collection of mugs that I made in this throwing session. I made a few more, but they ended up drying too fast. After these bodies have dried to leather hard, which is when the clay is dried out enough that you can pick it up, but the clay is still somewhat malleable, we can start trimming. It usually takes about 24 hours for the clay to get leather hard. This right here is a chuck that I made a few months ago. The purpose of a chuck is to trim the pots upside down and round out the body in case it got warped when picking it up from the wheel. These here are trimming tools. The purpose of the trimming tools are to remove clay from a blank pot and carve the final shape you want for the mug. This is a spinner tool. When trimming, I like to have a connection to the body of the clay. This allows me to keep one finger on top of the body without any friction causing the piece to come off center. While trimming, I like to make sure my pieces stay leather hard and not dry out. So, while I'm trimming one piece, I spray the others and cover them in a bag. Finally, we get to trim. First, I need to attach the chuck to the wheel. I do so by wetting the wheel itself and the bottom of the chuck and tap the side of it to center it, or tap center. I then press down and make sure it is really stuck on the wheel. I am aware that this is not the best method because every single time I trim, the chuck is bound to fly off. Though this might ruin pieces, it really improves my reaction time. I then put my piece on the chuck and tap center the top of it to be parallel with the rim of the mug. I then need to tap center the spinner tool, then I can start trimming. Trimming isn't all that complicated. It really is just removing clay until it is the shape and weight you want the mug to be. Though, when trimming, I like to go over the entire surface of the clay to make sure it is smooth all over and not have any rough spots. I really enjoy the trimming process. I find it soothing watching the footage back and just seeing the shape really appear. I can also find this time to be the perfect time for me to zone out and just really enjoy what I am doing. Though, I do find myself sitting in one position and hurting my back. After I've gotten the shape I want, I make sure to press my maker's mark into the foots I just made, or even the rim. I then make sure I touch up the inside and the rim of my pieces using a Giffen grip. A Giffen grip is the plastic wheel with prongs that is holding my piece in place. Now comes the scary part where most beginners fall short or fail, making and attaching handles. There are many ways to make a handle, and I was taught the toughest way, pulling a handle. This method is grabbing a hunk of clay and stroking it downwards to make a long and thin piece of clay that can be used to create a handle. This method is very difficult because it requires patience to pull the clay and not rush by pulling with too much pressure. If someone were to pull with too much power or a dry hand, the clay will just rip, causing you to restart. What I am doing now is moving the clay downwards without pulling with too much clay in each movement. What I am trying to achieve is by creating a long piece of clay that I can turn into individual blanks. A blank is a term used for a piece of clay that is a good starting point for what you are trying to make. In this case, it is a handle blank. Before the blank is attached to the mug body, the area where the handle will be attached needs to be scored and slipped to create an uneven surface for the clay to catch and stick to. I then smush the blank into that area and smooth around the edges to make it clean. I make sure that the handle is wet and so is my hand, and I continue to pull the handle until it is the length of my desire. I then press the other end to the bottom of my piece and, again, smooth it out. Usually I'd be done with this mug, but I was bored and wanted to try out a thumb piece on the handle and the side. I'm very happy with how this mug turned out, but not the others. I was really excited to try out a different clay body than what I am used to, but I was disappointed. It wasn't very fun to throw, and it wasn't messy like the brown clay, which I really enjoyed to throw and trim. I am so excited to get back to my brown clay. If you stayed till the end, I wanted to say thank you, and I hope you continue watching my videos.